and he's presented the show How to Be Okay in a Meaningless How to Be Meaningless in an Okay World. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. But we're very pleased. This is Lance's first show at Ro2, and well, without further ado, Lance Myers, welcome.
Hello.
So you're relatively new to fine arts, having done a lot of work in the graphic arts and I guess film. And
That's right.
Tell me about some of that work that you've done in the past.
Oh yeah. So my background's in animation. Early on, I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to write comic strips, and so I went to UT, and there was a lot of really, really talented cartoonists there who were doing comic strips for the college paper. And all of those, so I made friends with a lot of those people who were doing that, and they all started sort of gravitating towards animation at the same time. And one of them recommended that I go down to this animation studio that was forming there in Austin because they were behind schedule, getting some straight-to-DVD kids show done. And so they're giving people on-the-job training for animation. It's like, okay, whatever, if it pays, I'll go down there. And sure enough, I got the job. And then a month into that job, they were training me how to be a cleanup artist in animation. A month in, they landed a big contract with Warner Brothers, and we started working on Space Jam. So it's like a month into my very first animation job, I was already working on Bugs Bunny. It's like just right place, right time kind of thing. So that just became my career. It's like, working on Space Jam, Anastasia, Quest for Camelot, Prince of Egypt, and then eventually Richard Linklater's Scanner Darkly. But Austin was not necessarily a hotbed for that kind of work outside that one particular studio. So when their relationship with Warner Brothers dried up, I gravitated towards video games because, again, there were a lot of studios there in Austin. They paid the bills, and it was fun. So I still do video game work, but that was my origin story.
Okay.
How to become an artist, a professional artist.
And how did you transition into painting?
So I had been interested in painting for a long time too. When I went to UT early on, I studied painting. I went and got my Bachelor of Fine Arts there. So I studied studio art at UT, and I did do some painting early on, and I had some shows. This was almost 30 years ago now. But then once I started doing the animation stuff, I just naturally went that direction for a while. But when a couple years ago, my daughter got married, bought a house, and they needed stuff for their walls. And I had some blank canvases in the garage. They were looking at buying some of this work. I was like, hey, let me just do some work for you. Save your money. We'll cover your walls. And so, back 30 years ago, whenever I was doing the painting, I was really heavily into pop art of the type, skateboard culture art, underground comics art, kind of in-your-face pop art kind of stuff, Mad Magazine, Robert Crumb, that sort of thing. But, when I was doing the stuff for my daughter's house, that wasn't really going to fit the bill. So I started looking at more geometric abstraction. It's like a lot of Paul Klee type work, and that was a real challenge for me. I'd never done anything like that before, and so that got me thinking in much different terms. And that one way on the back there, that is one that started to evolve out of, like, once I had done all this geometric abstraction stuff for her house, I started letting it become a little bit more organic, and that one is the oldest one here. That was the first one that I started kind of meandering through different styles and that sort of thing. And through that experimentation led me into the still life stuff. So, yeah. And
did it start generally with various types of still lifes, or did you go straight for still?
I think the next earliest one would be this one right here, this sort of one in the lower left-hand corner. So that's more fruit, less, yeah. These little ones were early, and so there's not as many flowers there. It's more experimenting with, as you can see, it's like the forms of the fruit and the bugs are very similar. And so it sort of was, kind of playing around with just, I think it's still remnants of that geometric abstraction in there. So it's more like about working with color, shape, texture, and composition, and that sort of thing. And I kind of feel like the still lifes are still that in a way. They're sort of like, geometric abstraction, in disguise.
Makes sense. So when you first started working on the still lifes, on the florals, was there something that just grabbed you that made you kind of gravitate towards that the most?
They're pretty. They're pretty, and they're explosive. I think this is another one of the earlier ones, and I liked how I kind of, I painted it, and I thought I was painting flowers, and then when I backed up and realized how much energy I felt like I was still on there, that you don't necessarily see in a lot of still life work. I nicknamed it the battle scene, because it felt more like there was like some sort of struggle going on. That's why that one's named Fight or Flight at the Dawn of Each Day. So that was, just the energy, and that's, I kind of like that interplay of like, we've got this very established genre in the still life, and it has, a lot of roots, it's like an old feeling, very classical feeling type thing, but with a lot of energy and a lot of like trying to like explode out to fill the canvas and get a little bit fantastical with that. I don't know, just fun.
So they're almost like props or elements to a larger composition.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then always sort of based on that more like neutral, trading on that tradition of we recognize it. We're just used to seeing that sort of thing on paint on canvas, so that's a nice foundation to build on and experiment with, I think.
Do you have kind of an image or a kind of like a scheme in mind before you begin working on a floral arrangement, or do you start with flowers?
I usually, because I've been working in the digital realm so long, working in video games, I'm very comfortable, painting digitally, and so I plan these out all digitally first. So I do these digital paintings to experiment with composition and form and what goes where, and sometimes I'll paint up a flower, which we still have the other one I can show you. There's some of these you can kind of tell are almost collages. It's like I'll paint some flowers, and then I'll realize, the flower I painted for this one looks better over here, so I'll cut it out and put it in over here digitally again. And then sometimes I kind of like how I don't always cut it out the best when I'm like mixing and matching. So there's still a little bit of like halo around it. Like the one that I think sold and is gone had a very obvious case of that, where there was a flower there. It seemed like it fit, but if you look close, you can see where I cut it out from a different one and pasted it on there. So it's a lot of mixing and matching and planning in the digital phase first, and then I'll take and start moving to canvas, and then inevitably something doesn't work like I thought it would, and then that's when I kind of off-road and start just painting and ad-libbing on the canvas too.
It's interesting that when you've got like a halo left over from a digital plan piece, that you're transferring it to.
I kind of like to leave it, you know. And sometimes there's some digital, even like some little JPEG brushing elements that I try to preserve as I'm painting some of these.
And the bugs.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, I feel like there's a couple of different ways we can look at that. The Dutch masters, obviously, that I'm obviously inspired by, and some of these things, they have bugs, and the bugs symbolize different things back then. I'm not necessarily interested in symbolizing some of the specific things that they were doing with theirs. For me, it feels more about, beauty is embarrassing. I think it's like a title of some documentary about a painter, I think. I don't know who that was, but it's true. And the reason I bring it up here is it feels like if it were Latin, it's very straight, just painted specifically to be all as beautiful as possible. There's risks involved in being too, like, overly sentimental or too sappy, corny feeling. The bugs are a good foil for that, I feel like. The bugs, yeah, are a good balance. Also, I think there's some elements in there that feel, if I did get personal about the way I think I operate, it has to do with imperfections in life and troubles and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, infiltrating an otherwise great life.
Totally makes sense. And then your titles are interesting.
Yeah.
How do you kind of come up with those?
Well, when I was painting a lot of these, I was going through a Camus phase. I was reading a lot of Camus. I had read The Stranger, and I loved it. I was kind of surprised that I liked it so much, so I read some more of the Myth of Sisyphus, Fall. And, I like studying what he has to say about meaning, and that's where we get part of the title too. But I would, my perfect morning, right, is like I get up really early and spend some time in the studio painting, and then go walk the dog, and then come home and read a little bit, and then go back and paint some more. And so I was reading Camus at the time I was painting a lot of these, and a lot of the passages would just stick with me. And I think they just sort of, I feel like they sort of hovered and floated around in my head as I was painting these, so it made sense to use them as titles. And I like the sort of overwrought mouthful, like the almost full sentence title of these things, inspired by other artists who do that. Rosenquist has great titles for his paintings. Public Enemy has really, Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. It's a great title. It's like, so it's a mouthful, it's so poetic. And to do that feels, it's engaging. It's like adding more texture and more layering in meaning, so that if you have that in your head as you're looking at the picture, it sort of brings, it drums up stuff. It sort of like puts more stuff in the air as you're looking at it, which I like.
Yeah. When we first met, you described the paintings, and I want to say you said they were heavy metal florals. Is that
No, but I like that. Heavy metal
It was
floral.
something along those lines. Hard rock florals.
I don't know, but that sounds great.
Yeah.
I was a genius when I said that.
I think I guess I've been misquoting.
No, I like it. Keep doing it.
So, what do you think is next? Do you think that this series, this type of work, will continue moving forward, or do you see it evolving into something else?
It already is starting to evolve. I've got some other things I'm adding in, some figurative stuff, and some of those newer things. But I'm not ready to abandon it yet. I'm not ready to move completely on. I still think there's more to say with these, and I still want to do more. But yeah, it's been weird trying to add figurative elements.
Yeah.
See what you think.
Yeah. Let's see if anyone here has questions. Any questions about the work? Ricardo?
Yeah, I was wondering, forgive me for these are personal questions, but I'm just curious for my own research. On a monthly basis, how much would you say you spend for your home on just decoration from flowers? And also, do you use insecticide like at your home?
No insecticide that I'm aware of, I don't think. And not much on flowers, honestly. When I was in a band, John remembers those days. When I was in a band years and years ago, the guitar player was a flower delivery guy, and his boss let us use the florist shop for practice space. So it was the best smelling band practice space that has ever been, and so we were, this kind of ties in, right? The heavy metal florals, right? That here we were playing these songs in amongst the flowers and everything, and it was a wonderful way to spend a couple hours. I forget the question. Oh, yeah. So I haven't spent a lot on flowers. I usually, when I do buy flowers, it's usually the cheap kind at H-E-B or something. But what I do like is keeping them around even after they're dead. My studio is full of dead flowers, which I just love. It's like they dry up and they but they stay in place. And so I've got tons of those in my studio, along with dead bugs.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, Jill?
I just love the bugs, I must say, because the more you look, the more you find in the paintings, and I find there's a sort of an element of humor in the use of the bugs and the size of the scale of them, and I presume they're real, like bugs, or are they invented, some of them?
They are invented.
They're invented.
Yes, I mean I do look, definitely look at bugs for reference.
Yes.
But I typically like take a shell from one or legs from another or whatever it is, just whatever fits the bill and looks right there.
Right for you.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you feel that well, I'm glad you like them. But I like that you picked out sort of the element of humor. It's supposed to be subversive. It's supposed to be irreverent.
Yes. And I think of it also maybe, which is probably not in your book, but sort of hints of the element of decay.
Yes.
Or,
yes.
A little, dissonance, a little fear, a little terror in there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mentioned the Dutch masters earlier, and the symbolism of their work, and it always really did have to do with the temporal nature of life, and they would do the sort of I can't pronounce it, the memento mori.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
I don't have any skulls in mine, but I think there is an element of decay. You're right that does sort of speak to that.
Just a hint.
Right. Yeah. I'm so glad you picked up on that. It's great. Thank you.
So I guess kind of going off Julian's question about invented insects or whatever, the sense of scale with as it shifts around from composition to composition, as it relates to the size of the bugs versus the size of the petals and the size of the flowers, I find that really interesting and how that kind of infects the narrative of the kind of satire or humor or the decay is actually happening.
Yeah.
And then just the kind of idea of bugs and decay in general. Just wondering if you could maybe elaborate on some of that.
It's so now. As I'm working, I know I do like the way it's working. I like the balance of the flowers and the bugs and all these elements and sort of attitudes that you mentioned that are playing with each other as I piece them together. So it now feels like, since I know that that's working for me and I like playing with that, it is again just sort of a pick and choose, composition-wise, what seems to work, and it really does start to revert back to just thinking in terms of the abstraction and just working with composition and trying to figure out, I like this big bright element here, it needs to be counterbalanced here, and I'm not necessarily doing it consciously. It's just sort of what feels like it fits right on the page, and so it's really not much more than that. It's I like these elements that I think are working together. Now how can I fit them together in a way that's pleasing and cool and feels right, and just going from the gut at that point.
For sure. And so do you think that affects the sense of scale? Let's say the insects, particularly this one behind Jordan's head, right here, where the bugs are ginormous up against this vase, and some of these other flowers that are also ginormous,
Yeah.
And is that I guess I don't know enough about flowers or bugs or anything, but are they indicative of a natural sense of scale, or is that you just kind of playing around with compositional elements?
It's not. There's nothing realistic about it necessarily. It's just playing with the elements and seeing what feels explosive in the right ways. What gives the picture balance or gives the picture energy.
Totally.
And a lot of experimentation of let's scale this up. Again, I'm working digitally when I plan a lot of these, so I can just scale things up and place them and then know that didn't quite work, or I like the bug I did over here, let's grab that one and throw it on this one and play like that. Yeah.
Not necessarily a question, but I really I'm very glad that I came to your talk, because when I came to your show, I saw a lot of these elements that you're answering for me. Like I saw a collage. At first I thought they were collages until I got up to them, and then, of course, I'm a collage artist now that used to be a painter.
Oh.
And I also started working digitally to plan my work out.
Yeah.
You know, probably in the last couple of years. And so that's fascinating to me. And then also fascinating, your arc as an artist, from a young artist, kind of doing what a lot of, I think, young artists are drawn to. Like I was drawn to like comic books and comic stripping when I was like in my teens, and then making the art into like abstract art, you know, pure abstraction, and then back into like figurative art, but still with an abstract nature to it, you know, referencing the figure. I don't know, I think that's kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of sophistication like in your work, and I see all those elements like in your work, specifically the one that Bramley was just talking about, or the ones with kind of like more of a flat graphic background.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's just awesome, because you can see like the 35, you know, plus whatever years, you know, you've been an artist or thinking about art, like actually like in that one piece and one composition, and then knowing the history of it, and then your thought process, and then even Camus on top of that, you know, and then even as a musician, like all those things I'm like seeing in specifically that piece. I see elements in all the other pieces.
Yeah.
And I don't know how new that one is compared to the others, but that to me, like that one piece, and maybe even the one next to it with the table, but even the Klee, you know, it's just like, I feel all those things are referenced in that one image, and I just find that like highly sophisticated and like and highly pleasing as another artist.
Wow.
So not necessarily a question, but I just, you know, I'm really, really glad that I came here to hear about your work today, because it really just, you know, resonates like the way I really wanted it to. You know, it's like even better. It's like the cherry on top. So
that means the world to me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that.
No, thank you. It's really, really sophisticated and really, really great work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. That's great.
Shall we end with Woody's praise?
Yeah, everybody go home.
So, you mentioned the Dutch masters, and you mentioned earlier the pop art and everything. I'm kind of looking at, you said this one was one of the earlier ones, and I'm kind of seeing like a slow transition. I don't know if this is, most of it kind of interesting what your overall favorite influences are, but this one I kind of see a little bit of impressionism, post-impressionism, but then it kind of moves more towards, like you said, the Dutch masters with the much more clear lines and a lot more play with the light and dark.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just always interested in graphic artists and what their influences are.
Yeah. You know, when I'm working really in a real tight way, like these two back here, it can be a lot of effort. It's like, you know, getting into the studio and, you know, taking that deep breath and knowing, okay, I'm gonna need a couple hours, if I don't have the time to like really focus. There's like a lot of concentration to try to get into that space where I can do this really meticulous stuff. But something like this, not as much, and it feels like working in that loose sense is a little free. Like I need that sometimes. So like sometimes go back and forth between like I can just relax a little bit and let a brush stroke be loose and let it fall where it falls, and just enjoy the process of putting paint on. And I don't think it necessarily suffers from being that way, but it's just a different approach and a different feel, and it's sometimes I need that. So I would do like a loose one, and then I do a really tight one, and I go back and do a loose, like that one in the middle, lower one was like, okay, here's one for me. I'm just gonna get loose with it and just play, and not have to really focus so hard. I mean, both are rewarding. Both processes are very rewarding, but sometimes I just have to go back and forth and mix it up.
No one else? Okay. Well, thank you, Lance.
Yeah, thank you.
Great show.
don't go home.